We good? All right. So call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the consent agenda items 1 through 11. Or, excuse me, approval of the minutes. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from September 20th. Is there any discussion on the minutes? If not, then I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded. All in favor of said motion, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Madam Clerk?
Consent agenda items 1 through 11.
Has every member had a chance to review the consent agenda? And if so, is there any discussion?
Mayor, I'd like to pull items 6 and 7.
6 and 7 will be pulled from the consent agenda and discussed immediately following the consent agenda. Any further discussion? See none. If there's no further discussion, I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda items 1 through 11 with the exception of 6 and 7. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded. All in favor of said motion, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. We are now on item 6. Chair recognizes Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Due to a personal conflict, I need to abstain from this vote.
Please let the record show that Councilmember Johnson is abstaining from vote on item number 6. I make a motion to accept staff's recommended action for item number 6.
Second.
Is there a second? Motion has been made in the second. All in favor of said motion, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it with the exception of Councilmember Johnson. Now turning to item number 7 of the consent agenda, the chair recognizes Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Due to a personal conflict, I need to abstain from this item.
Please let the record show that Councilmember Johnson is abstaining from item number 7. Any further discussion? If there's no further discussion, I'll make a motion to accept staff's recommended action with item number 7 on the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Vice Mayor Tuttle. All in favor of said motion, please respond by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it with the exception of Councilmember Johnson. Madam Clerk.
Board of Bids and Contracts dated September 26, 2022.
Good morning.
Morning, Mayor and City Council. Josh Lauber, Finance Department. The Board of Bids for September 26, 2022 are as follows. For engineering, we have the Gilbert Street Drainage for Meese Construction Incorporated in the amount of $239,833. For purchasing, we have the interior and exterior modification of 2 residential sites deferred to November 14th, 2022. We have 19,000 GVWR cab and chassis with utility bed for Don Hatton Chevrolet Incorporated for an aggregate bid total of $259,000 even. We have the service and maintenance of groundwater extraction remediation wells for Lane Christensen Company for $23,915. We have the roof replacement at Evergreen Resource Center deferred October 3rd, 2022. We have 33,000 GVWR cab and chassis with thermo pothole patcher for Omaha Truck Center, base bid of $404,500. This is how to become a vendor with the City of Wichita. These are our current open requests for proposals out on the street. And I recommend to approve the bid awards as recommended.
Any questions for staff? See none. Any discussion on the item? If there's no discussion, then I'll make the motion to accept staff's recommended action to receive and file the report, approve the contracts, and authorize the necessary signatures. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Vice Mayor Tuttle. All in favor of said motion, please respond by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Madam Clerk.
Petitions for public improvements.
Morning.
Morning, Mayor and Council members. Gary Jansen, Public Works Engineering. The petitions for public improvements for your consideration this morning represent 100% of the improvement district. The signatures on each do, and the petitions are valid per Kansas statute. Don and Darrow edition, West Kellogg Drive and West Street in District 4 includes petition for water improvements. In July of 2021, the City Council approved petitions for water, sewer, and paving improvements to serve Monarch Landing 5th Edition in District 2. The developers submitted revised petitions with revised improvement districts due to lot splits. The budgets remain the same for the water, sewer, and paving improvements. With that, staff recommends City Council approve the new and revised petitions and budgets, adopt the new and amending resolutions, and authorize the necessary signatures. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Is there questions for staff? If there's no questions, is there further discussion? See none. Since there's no further discussion, I'll make the motion to accept staff's recommended action to approve the new and revised petitions and budgets, adopt the new and amending resolutions, and authorize the necessary signatures. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Vice Mayor Tuttle. All in favor of said motion, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Madam Clerk.
Council member appointments and comments.
We'll start off with board appointments. Are there any board appointments at this time? Vice Mayor Tuttle.
Thank you. I would like to appoint Sean Seamster to the Wichita Employee Retirement System, and I will send the information to the clerk. Thank you.
Further appointments for boards. Councilmember Frye.
Thank you. I'd like to appoint Stacy Myers to the Affordable Housing Review Board.
Further. If there's no further board appointments this time, I'll make a motion to accept the appointments. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Vice Mayor Tuttle. All in favor of said motion, please respond by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Back on announcements and comments. If there's no further announcements or comments, then I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting so that we can go into our workshop. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded. All in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. We are adjourned. Mr. Manager, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have three significant items for your consideration and discussion today. The first one has to do with recommendations coming to you regarding redistricting for 2022, effective 23. And then also talking about a brand-new program that we're bringing forward to help those who have lost their licenses or had suspended driver's licenses. And then the third program is regarding homelessness assistance and federal dollars that are available to us for a unique project. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Wadle to talk about the redistricting process.
Morning.
Good morning. Scott Wadle from the Planning Department. Thank you for the opportunity to present on this item. I'll just note quickly that there's a staff team that's been working on this as well, and some of those members are here. Naomi from Communications, Mike and Dan from IT, Stephen from GIS, and Sharon from the Law Department, including many others who have helped out. In addition, from the Commission of Electors, we have the chairperson, Marcy Gregory, with us today too. So just want to point them out real quick before I get started here. So the recommended action, of course, this is a workshop, so it's not for you to take any specific action, but to provide comments, feedback, and direction on this. And you'll see more about that process as we go through this. So in terms of the overview for this presentation, I'll go through the background process, public input recommendations, and next steps. And for those of you who are in attendance at the DAB meetings, this will be very similar to what you saw at the DABs. So in terms of background, Charter Ordinance 173, which you've got a copy at the table of course, spells out that every 10 years after the census, we'll look at the population of the districts, and that the council would appoint a commission of electors, and that their task would be to look at the boundaries of the different council districts and create boundaries that would result in no more than 5% population deviation among those districts. And that on or prior to the end of the year, December 31st, the council would take action to establish those new council districts. In terms of population, I'm gonna move this one. What we have currently, this is based on the 2020 census, which is the most recent 10-year census, is that District 2 is slightly above the 5% and District 3 is slightly below the 5% threshold that we're looking for. Oops. Things to keep in mind as we talk about this process. There are a number of things here, but first is that election precincts, which is what you're going to see on the maps, those are the smaller geographies that you see throughout those, would be used. Number two, that we're looking to maintain reasonably compact areas for the districts, so not spread all over the place, to maintain as much integrity for broadly cohesive areas of interest, and this did come up in some of the discussions with the Commission of Electors. Avoid using registered voters by partisan or party or partisan information. So definitely don't want to do that. And then the resulting districts, again, within the 5%. And then thinking about the future, where's the growth likely to occur in the next 10 years? We've got some information to help cover that. So here's a map of the election precincts with the current council districts. In addition, the commission looked at neighborhood associations and HOAs. HOAs aren't on this map, but we did use maps with that information. And then growth areas. So this is based on the comprehensive plan. You can see the areas in gray showing new employment, new residential areas. In terms of the process, so the first step was, again, the appointment of the Commission of Electors, and these volunteers served in this capacity. They had 8 meetings where they went over concepts, and there were, I believe, more than 20 concepts that were developed throughout the process. So there were quite a few documents to review and that they considered. Also, then they made refinements and adjustments to those, and ultimately the recommendations that are coming to you today. And throughout the process, public input was accepted and considered, and we'll talk a little bit more about how that occurred. So here's the listing of the 8 meetings and just some general topics that they covered at those meetings. So you can see it was quite a robust schedule for these volunteers. In terms of the process, we established a website. On that website was a dashboard that members of the public, members of the commission could go and zoom in for more specific information. It is active right now. If you go to wichita.gov/redistricting, and you can see the dashboard and zoom in on the different areas. In terms of public input, that was important to the process. There were opportunities for members of the public to come to the commission meetings and provide their comments in person. They could also do that through email, through letters. There was an open house that was held at the Wichita Art Museum. There were approximately 50 folks who attended this, and there's a summary write-up on the website. This provided folks an opportunity to provide comments on the maps, as you can see in the corner here of this graphic where they put sticky notes up around the maps. We also used Forum, the online system for gathering input and discussion on the City of Wichita, with the City of Wichita webpage. Also social media with Facebook, Twitter, and Nextdoor. And also at the DAB meetings, that provided another opportunity. Now these folks were here mostly for a zoning meeting, but I wanted to emphasize that they did have an opportunity to weigh in on redistricting at the different district meetings. So in terms of the commission recommendations, there were 2 maps that they're recommending to you. We're calling them A and B. And so I'll go through a little bit about what the differences are between these maps. So this is map A. One thing that I would point out on these maps is that the top number is the precinct number. It's in blue. I know you can't read it on the screen, but on the maps in front of you, it should be the same colors. And then the red number is the population of that precinct. So that's what those represent. The dark bold lines are the current city council district boundaries. So we'll show a little bit about how that plays into it. There is an analysis that's provided. I didn't put these on the screen for you to read through all of it, but just know that that's one of the handouts that you've got. There's actually a couple of them, one for A and one for B, and they're also posted online. So here's map B, and again, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I'll go through the differences and similarities here. So both A and B are recommending changing precinct 538 from District 5 into District 4, and that has a population of 901 individuals.
Hey, Scott?
Yes, sir.
Not to cut you off. Could you go back and pause for maybe 5 seconds on those types of slides just for the people watching at home on YouTube? Because we'll be able to see this, but they won't, so they can
Yes,
kind of
sir.
see where those are going.
So what I'll do is just describe what's on here. So you'll see the analysis sheet, and again, you can find these online and download them and print them if you like, if folks like. But it lists the election district changes, the neighborhood association district changes in terms of which districts they would come from and go to, and then also the same is true for the homeowners associations. And then this is a continuation of the homeowners associations. So that was for map A. This is for map B. So election districts, you can see that there are 3 that would change. Neighborhood associations, 3 under this scenario that would change. And then you can see the list of homeowners associations. So there's a number of those. So we've covered this one, so it would be a change from District 5 into District 4. And again, this is represented on both A and B, include this one. A and B also have the similarity that they're recommending shifting precincts 213 and 212 from District 2 into District 1. And I should mention that during the deliberations that the Commission of Electors had, there was quite a bit of discussion about this area of town, kind of in the southeast kind of portion of the city, because the precincts don't match up with neighborhood associations, and so trying to keep neighborhood associations whole was a big challenge that they faced. Also, they have the similarity, both A and B, recommending precinct 101 to go from District 1 into District 3.
Scott, can I ask you a question real quick?
Yes, sir.
So you were trying to keep, we're trying to keep neighborhood associations together. We're trying to keep HOAs together as well?
Yes, sir, that's correct. And I think for the most part, they were able to do that, but it was something they spent quite a bit of time deliberating about. Now, this one is one that I need to point out because in some of the presentations to the DAB, we didn't quite get this right, and you can see part of it is because of the colors. So we have a peach and we have pink. I have included a sheet that better defines this at the table for you. This is printed directly from the dashboard that's available to members of the public online. And what it is that up at the interchange of 135 and K96, there is a sliver, which is precinct 626. And in scenario A, it would change from District 6 into District 1. In scenario B, it would remain as it is currently today in District 6. So it would affect 36 people, according to the census information, and that is a difference between A and B. And I'll talk about how that lines up with the DAB recommendations, especially District 6, because they had quite a bit of discussion about it.
Scott, the
Yes,
natural
sir.
barrier there being the interstate, right?
Yes, sir.
That's
It
really
doesn't.
what separates those two precincts, is the interstate.
I know that it's in the area. I'm not exactly sure which side it ends up on in terms of east or west. And I will defer to the folks. Mike, do you have any insights on that?
It's on the east side of
So the interstate is located on the east side of this precinct, is that correct?
the precinct is on the east side.
Oh, the precinct is on the east side of the interstate. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I mean, this call-out sheet helps.
Oh,
It really-
yes.
It really demonstrates it better, more better.
I knew that was coming.
The next change that I'd like to show is in scenario A, precinct 216 would go from District 2 into District 1. And this is a difference, again, between scenario A and scenario B. So in scenario B, it would remain in District 2. So that is an overview of the similarities and some of the differences between the scenarios. This was considered by the district advisory boards, and they came back with 3 of them voting for map A and 3 of them voting for map B.
Of course.
Of course. The one thing that I would point out is that District 6, there was quite a bit of discussion about precinct 626, which is that sliver by the interchange. And their recommendation was for map B and to keep that in District 6, which fortunately turns out that's how it is in the map anyway. So it doesn't change what their recommendation was. So in terms of next steps, again, the schedule on this that is spelled, and part of this is spelled out in the charter ordinance, is that the deadline is really for you all to take action. The goal is the end of the year, so December 31st. So at this point, it's your opportunity to discuss it and make any changes as you wish. So again, we're seeking comments, feedback in any direction that you have. So with that, I'll stand by and answer any questions.
Scott, I just wanted to make a comment. In District 2, the original motion was to accept map A, and then during the, and it was seconded, and then during the discussion phase, 2 of my district advisory board members live in precinct 216. And so they then asked for a substitute motion because they would like to stay in District 2. But everyone agreed on the district advisory, and so that's how we ended up with map B. But during the discussion portion, everybody, I would say, came to agreement that both maps were good and that they would be satisfied with either map with no changes. So just wanted to let you know, and I did have a discussion with my DAB that, you know, if I try not to, I try and align with my DAB and be supportive of their decision, but if map A is the map that came to us at the bench, that I would go against their wishes, if you will, but they all understood the rationale. So I just wanted to make that point that there wasn't really a big disagreement or one was liked better than the other. It was just the nuance that 2 of the district advisory board members would be moved to a different district. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, we're looking for some guidance. First of all, is there any information you need from us before you're ready to discuss this? And if not, then when would you like this scheduled? We could bring it to you on October 11th if that worked into you, if that was acceptable. But we really leave it up to you on timing.
I'd like a little more time to discuss it. I mean, I think that this is the first time that the council has received not just these maps, but also the result of the DAB board votes as well. And I think that since we aren't in any type of time crunch, allowing more discussion to happen, particularly folks now can go back and look at the discussion within the DAB meetings, as was pointed out by Vice Mayor Tuttle, that, you know, some of that discussion might shine more light on why A or B, especially considering how I guess split DABs are with this. I think giving a little extra time for the public to weigh in would be smart.
I would just make the comment that at our DAB, it was pretty similar except for the precinct 626, just because it was such a small amount of people. Like, was it really worth maybe causing any confusion to change representation, or there was just significant discussion, we'll say, about such a small amount of people switching districts.
So some of the feedback I've gotten is about splitting HOAs into different districts as well as splitting different neighborhoods. So I'd like to take a little better look at that as well.
So maybe November?
Yeah, we don't have to come up with a date at this moment either. I think that if it turns out it takes a few weeks and then we got all the data or all the information back, then fine. If it takes a little longer, it takes a little longer.
I just want to make one final comment, if that's okay. I really want to give a robust thank you to staff for all your work on this. I know this was something that was added, and your department's already extremely busy with all the growth and development we're seeing in our community. So thank you to staff for, and I know I asked a million questions and I attended the meetings and everything was well organized, and I'm really appreciative and grateful and pleasantly surprised how flawlessly it seems the process went. And then also to thank the Commission of Electors. I know that they sacrificed their time away from their friends and family, and things move quickly, and we all learned a lot. So just thank you to everyone involved in the process so we could get to this point and have 2 really good maps to be able to select from.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't need any additional information. I watched all the meetings. I'll go back and watch more of the DAB meetings. So we'll have those conversations, but I'm fine.
All right.
Scott, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
All right. Mayor, if it's all right with you, we're ready to move on to the Wichita Area Restoration Program.
Floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It's my privilege to present to you the Wichita Area Restoration Program, or W.A.R.P. In doing so, I'm missing a slide I thought I had. In doing so, I'm going to kind of walk you through the inspiration for W.A.R.P, the process for creating the program, present to you local data which helped inform the process, and then show you what the program will actually do, the lines of effort of the program. So the inspiration for W.A.R.P came, it seems like a long time ago. The city manager came to us and said, hey, you know, there's this terrific program in Durham that's making a real difference for people in their court system. And that he wanted us to look at it and see what would really work for Wichita, Kansas. You know, Durham, North Carolina is a very different place with very different structures. And so we took a look at that, looked at their goals, and their goal was to remove barriers from employment and housing through expunging charges, convictions for criminal records, and restoring suspended licenses using the current state laws, extensive shareholder collaboration and grant funding. And so we looked at that, we looked at their structures, and one of the key things that they utilized was a steering committee that was multidisciplinary, multi-jurisdictional, to look at the problem and really understand the problems from different directions as they all participated in the process and understood it from a different vantage point. And so that's what we ended up doing, is building a steering committee to present the information gathered and create an idea of, so how should we approach, what should we approach, and how should we approach it? So the steering committee that was created includes all of these local luminaries, and they offer tremendous perspective on what we should do. And one of the things that developed out of these meetings is that one of the critical differences between Durham and Wichita is that we have municipal courts, and they're fragmented. We've got county court systems, we've got municipal court systems. And so while Durham was able to create mass effects, so they could get people their licenses back en masse by getting rid of the suspensions and operating under their own laws, we can't do that in Wichita, Kansas. Every action is individualized, so the mass effects are really limited. So the committee looked at it and said, hey, well, Durham looked at expungements and driver's licenses. Because of our limited effects, because we don't have those mass effect tools, we need to really focus in on the problem of driver's license suspensions and make sure that we've got a solution to that because of that critical difference. The committee was chosen because of their expertise, authority for change, and the ability to champion change. And they were presented with the idea that the program that we create needed to operate under existing law, be data-driven, and focus on the best practices within the region. And so the local data that they were presented to help steer, to create the recommendations really showed the problem of driver's license suspensions here in the greater Wichita area. You can see that at the point when we presented the data, there were 227 suspended drivers in Kansas. But what's really notable is there was a study by New Jersey that went through all of the states and identified the levels of suspensions in each state in the union. Well, that 227,000 number represents a doubling of the number from when New Jersey studied it in 2007. So the problem's only growing. 25% of the state total is in Sedgwick County, and 70% of those are for failing to meet financial obligations. This last statistic is really notable because it shows that, for each person, you can see people on the bottom, 43,000 in the Wichita Municipal Court have suspensions. For each person, there's about 2 cases for which they're suspended, which means that they've got to handle the fees and suspension issues for each of those cases. And note that that's just within municipal court. That doesn't speak to what's going on in county court or other municipalities, because we have a very fragmented system at this lower level. Another really important thing to note is the age of suspension within the municipal court. So you can see more than half of the suspensions within municipal court, and this looks at the age of the oldest suspension, which means this person, whoever we're looking at, has been suspended for the total amount of time. And if they've got multiple suspensions, this is the oldest one, and 54% have been suspended for greater than 10 years, which is a little shocking. But if it's difficult to understand, if it's difficult to get the suspensions lifted, then you get into a repeating loop, and you continue to get more suspensions, and it becomes persistent and more difficult. This is, and once again, this is all municipal court data. This is the suspension balance by person. And so you can see that big orange block, which is roughly, we'll say 65% of the circle, is between $500 and $1,000. Now, they may owe more in other courts, but that's what it would take to get rid of the balance of that's on their suspended cases in the city of Wichita Municipal Court. And so the problem appears to be achievable. You've got people who clearly have a need, 10 years of suspended life, and then a number dollar amounts that are not astronomical, although there are, as you can see, the green is above $5,000. So there's a sliver that has much higher total balance. So this is the data that the committee looked at, and what they determined, based on what we perceive to be the funding amount that would be available, is to create a flexible program that would initially primarily look at driver's license suspensions. And I say flexible in that one of the charges of the program is to grow the program, to grow the funding, and to expand itself through community support or through grant funding. And so I think one of the beautiful parts of this program is that it is cross-jurisdictional, cross-departmental, cross-disciplinary. And so the goal is to have a lot of hands in the kitchen, a lot of people working on the same problem from different perspectives, and a lot of people understanding that this is a problem that needs to be worked on. So these are the lines of effort for the program. So looking back to DEER, the Durham Expunction and Restoration Program, they provided direct services, but they also acted as a hub to connect people to clinics, to connect pro bono attorneys, and so it was not just the provision of services. So that's what this also does. So while the lines of effort are provision of services to individuals in the Wichita area who have suspended driver's licenses. It's also to expand the service provision capacity through coordination and integration of pro bono activities. So reaching out to the pro bono attorneys and allowing them to help people be successful, to file motions, and to leverage attorneys in our area that care deeply about this. And we had 2 practitioners on our committee actually 3 practitioners, Andy Adams, Robert Moody, and Christy Campbell, who've done a lot of these pro bono activities. Coordination and integration and expansion of existing driver's license clinics. Marilyn Harp was another person on our committee, and they have put on 2 driver's license clinics within the last 12-ish months. In those clinics, they served roughly 300 people. But one of the really remarkable things in being able to participate and watch what went on in those clinics is folks didn't know how to get their license back. They had no idea. And if you go to the state websites, it's still really difficult to understand what it's telling you. It doesn't tell you how to do it. And so that's one of the real hopes of this program, is that it will provide people roadmaps where they can know how to get that license back and assist them with following the roadmap. The 4th one is expanding the program funding base through grant writing and fundraising, and maintaining records, production of statistics, and reporting. Looking a little deeper, so one of the awesome things that we saw through the clinics is that KLS, at Kansas Legal Services, had developed really good relationships with KDOR. And so KDOR produced things that you simply don't see on the website for these individuals. And to be able to continue to leverage those relationships to get that information in people's hands so that they can be successful. This roadmap, I think, is going to not only help individuals, but it will also help the courts be able to extend compliance periods and understand whether or not these people that are coming before them are actually working towards the end goal that they believe they are. So you can go, but if we've got a standardized roadmap, a judge could ask someone, all right, so where are you on your roadmap to getting this license back? And that can be a trigger for more time or more assistance, so that we don't continue this cycle of repeating getting suspended, and never achieving legal driving. So I think that this roadmap is one of the critical pieces to that. And as soon as I wrap up, I've got Aaron Breitenbach and Mark with the DA's office. I apologize. Mark Bennett, I apologize. And they've been so gracious to come, and not only did they give their time through the 3 committee meetings, but they're also going to speak just a little bit about their impression of what this will do in the county court, because this really is a multi-jurisdictional program. If we got rid of every suspension in the city of Wichita today, very few people would be able to drive legally on that day. Because if you've got suspensions in one place, likely you've got them in another.
Nathan, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
So regarding this roadmap that you're going to develop, I'm always interested in, when you're developing a tool or a resource for individuals, that they be involved in the process. Mm-hmm. So I was just curious, is someone from this cohort of people who have suspended licenses, is it going to be field tested with them, or will it be reviewed with them to make sure that it's what they need, instead of, the people who are developing it aren't the ones who are actually going to be the end user. So I'm just curious how you're going to make sure that it's actually giving people who need this information what they need.
So the roadmap really will be what you have to do in different jurisdictions to get that license back. And so the hope is that it's standardized so that courts can expect to see the same thing, that it's meaningful and understandable so that the individuals can read and understand it. But staff members will also, I expect, go over that with them, ensuring that they understand. So it's not just, you know, like, here's this roadmap, go forth, do great things.
That's exactly
No,
what I was hoping.
it's more hands-on than that.
Because it's a complicated process. I mean, I'm trying to just understand it now, and I'm not even immersed in it.
Yes.
You know, so thank you.
It is very complicated, and I think that's one of the, as I said before, decomplexifying, if I can make up a word, is a critical component of this program. So number 3, the council provided us some tools to help people who are suspended get rid of fees, fines, and costs, and so the program would also help with the filing of those documents with both courts. And while most of this can be done through paralegal support, there will be the provision of an attorney to oversee and do the legal work that's necessary. Line of effort 2 is the expansion of service provision capacity through coordination and integration of pro bono activities. And so there's already great relationships in the pro bono community through KLS. And the staff would identify cases appropriate for that need those services, push them out, coordinate to ensure that cases reach disposition, and critical piece for including attorneys in this is providing malpractice insurance for those pro bono attorneys so that they can provide their services without fear of endangering their license. Line of effort 3, coordinating, integrating, and expanding existing driver's license clinics in the Wichita area. As you heard, KLS has already done 2 clinics in the last 12 months, serving over 300 people. Those produced a great number of fee, fine, cost forgiveness motions that went through both court systems and saw substantial, really to substantial effect. A lot of people got fines and fees withdrawn, which can help people get those suspensions lifted. It links W.A.R.P with these existing efforts, provides application, scheduling, information support to existing clinics, and it's a bi-directional integration of pro bono attorneys with W.A.R.P and existing clinics. So the clinics really, it's a point in time, but W.A.R.P will hopefully allow us to extend that point in time to a programmatic effort where if someone has an issue that they need help with, there's a place and people to assist them at all times. And if they need attorneys, linking those pro bono attorneys even out of the clinics, and also pushing them into the clinics if that's the appropriate time and place to handle a specific issue. W.A.R.P is designed to grow. So the fourth line of effort is identifying it, is expanding it through grant and writing and fundraising. So the program needs to identify grants and identify other financial resources to grow the program. Also to identify and solicit funding from local entities. Really get buy-in from our great community. And I think that really makes W.A.R.P powerful if we have that. And the third is, I think, a really special one as well, is to identify and perform services in additional areas of need based on funding. So as W.A.R.P grows, the hope is that it grows into areas like expungements and provides additional services as the capacity and as the program grows. So the hope is not that we just stop with driver's license suspensions. The hope is that the program grows into something bigger to help people succeed in many other facets of their court experience.
Nathan, may I ask another question?
Yes, ma'am.
an area obviously near and dear to my heart is grant writing and fundraising, and just curious, it would seem to me, I don't know, but my first impression would be this would be a really specialized and potentially challenging place to find grants to fund this program, right? So I'm just thinking, you know, the goals that you have now, are you going to be able to meet them with this program until funds can come in?
I believe so. And I'll, in about 2 slides.
Sorry.
No, that's not a problem.
Just interested.
No, absolutely. So, and the last line of effort is maintenance of records and identifying what success looks like, producing statistics, reporting outcomes. So the initial office structure will be generated through a source contract with Kansas Legal Services. As we went through those lines of effort, it became readily apparent that they were the only ones that could provide those services in the way that we needed them, and had especially the ability to ensure practitioners who are acting in a pro bono capacity. So the structure will begin with a WARP director / practitioner. A person's been identified. Andy, if you'd stand up, who has grant writing experience, is also a paralegal and has run programs. So likely she would be the one to kick us off with KLS. KLS will be the one doing the hiring. But, so the idea is to have a director who also is a practitioner, who can also has those abilities to write the grants and solicit funds from the community. There will also be a paralegal working with her to perform services generated from the court. KLS will provide attorney supervision, allowing those paralegals and practitioners to work on legal issues legally. And they also will provide administrative support. The anticipated funding from the city is $150,000, and that money is already in my budget. It comes from savings that was made when we moved away from our previous debt collector. I believe our debt collector was charging 19%, and we moved to one that's roughly 13%, which is not only good for building a program, but is also really good for the people who are being collected from. The city can charge up to 30% by law, and we are well below that. But that's where the funding would come from. And Mark and Eric, if you'd be willing, Mark Bennett, if you would be willing to come on up, I'd love for you to kind of speak to this from the county perspective. And once again, I truly appreciate all the steering committee members. They gave so much of their time and so much expertise and insight. So, Mark, thank you.
So the place this starts for the DA's office is we do somewhere in the order of about 20,000 traffic cases in the course of a year in the district court, and people often come in with license issues, whether it's something they did in the county or their license is suspended because of city court issues, or, and I think this is impactful here and why the number has gone up so much, the state legislature has expanded greatly the number of things that can get a person's license revoked. Not paying child support, not paying taxes, things like that. So there's all these other collateral things that don't have anything to do with the court system, but that is a punishment that is now available to the Department of Revenue. And so we have people who don't have licenses. They'll come into court and want to interact with our lawyers and, what do I do, that sort of thing. And while we try very much to steer them in the right direction, we cannot give legal advice. It's unethical. There's no question. My people represent the state. We can't represent the individual. Also, in the crush of business in the course of a day, it's something that sometimes takes a few minutes, and it creates difficulties there. And so while our people do, and I've seen it happen where they try and look, here's the motion, you just fill this out and ask the judge, and then it'll get on the docket, and the judge can reduce your, people are going, I don't know what that means. And so the notion here that we came to was that, utilizing an existing law firm. And that's what Kansas Legal Services is. They're a law firm. They have lawyers. They have the infrastructure. They're using them to come in and place somebody in both your court here in the city and ours in the county. Would be a great benefit. So when that person comes in and goes, I don't understand. Or we look on and go, dude, you're this close. You could really get this done. And the judge doesn't have to give you the entire fine. The judge has the ability to, the judge has more discretion now under state statute. They've also given judges more discretion. You just need to, you know what? Go talk to that nice person right there. They'll help you. That is something as simple as that could have a tremendous effect for people. And so that's really what this is about. I don't have authority to speak on the county in this regard, but I have been told by the county manager that they're willing to put in, pony up on this as well. I think the numbers are higher, far greater over here. I believe the current number of suspensions in Sedgwick County is about 56,000. You guys are at 43,000 of those individuals, so we have a much smaller percentage, but I think the number was about $50,000, and Tom Stoltz has told me, yeah, absolutely, we're good for that. So, I don't know that they voted on it, but I don't think $50,000 is out of the is anything there's going to be a fight over. Plus, they recognize the return on investment. If we can get those 13,000 people roughly then of the total from Sedgwick County back in good standing. And that's the whole point of the traffic system in the first place. Get, slow down, pay your fines and move on. Not to put some people in this perpetual system where they can't pay their fines and then are driving on a suspended. As someone who was hit one time by someone on a suspended license who had no insurance, none of us want that. What a colossal pain that is for the other lawful drivers. So I just think this is a let's use existing people who know what they're doing. And to the question like Councilperson Tuttle said, how do we know this is going to work? This isn't a mystery to the people who know what they're doing, to the lawyers, to the paralegals. We know it'll work because the system already works when someone can utilize it. The question is just getting that handoff to the person. So we're not creating a new lane or a new way of doing things. It's just plugging people in and giving them access to the people who can show them how to do it. So I'll turn this over to Aaron. He's got more of the details on the traffic system.
And perhaps my time is better spent if anyone has questions. I'd be glad to answer those. But to your point, Councilman Tuttle, I agree it's a niche. But if anyone is looking to invest in how to decrease people coming into the criminal justice system, this is a great investment in the private sector as well as the public. Because I see it. People that start in traffic, they lose their job because they can't get to work, which then causes them to spiral into other decisions. This is a great way for the community to make an investment in decreasing people involved in the criminal justice system. Because as we all know, once they get in, outcomes diminish for everyone. But yeah, as far as the program, as Mark said, our attorneys can show people, go there. But beyond that, there's just not much else we can do. And clearly, people who have issues with, processing and following, directions and knowing where to go, or having a phone to call, or whatever, being able to go online to get forms or print, some of these basic things that most of us take for granted are barriers. And so having people, basically kind of a navigator, so to speak, to help people through that process, we think will greatly improve outcomes and hopefully get more people licensed and insured on our roadways. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Once again, I want to give a huge thanks to Aaron and Mark and all of the participants in the steering committee. These are really important people doing important things, and they dedicated their time to help create this idea, and that hopefully we get to move forward for and make a real impact on our community on a really important problem. So with that, I stand for any questions you may have.
I have another question, and it may be more for Bob. And I just want to say thank you. I'm really interested in this, and I ask a lot of questions about things that I'm really interested and excited about, and I want to see this be successful. So just one initial thought that I had, Bob, is I understand the grant writing part perfectly. You know, that seems like something. As far as the city fundraising and receiving donations is to support this program, that seems unconventional to me, but maybe it's not. I don't know. I just want to make sure that, I mean, is like a new 501c3 going to be started, or how will that happen?
Well, it already is, because it's being, the contract is with KLS. They have the program. They are a 501c3. And so
Perfect. That makes
they're
perfect sense.
already a
I
fundraising
didn't catch that
conduit.
part.
Yep.
Thank you, Nathan.
Yep.
Thank you, thank you.
I had a couple real quick. What are the qualifications to have the fees waived?
So having fees waived, you have to demonstrate a manifest hardship. And so what is that? It's a good question. It's not defined by statute. It's not defined anywhere. So it really is a judicial determination as to what a manifest hardship is. I can tell you that looking through the statistics on what our court has done, it's roughly 95% of people who file get some manner of relief when they file for fee, fine, and cost forgiveness. It's very rare that they get complete relief because, you know, a judge is looking and saying, hey, you know, I think this part may be a manifest hardship and this part isn't. I think you can succeed at doing this and not that. Some do get full forgiveness. Usually those are people with disabilities and certain hardships that can be easily articulated. But it's a judicial determination.
Okay, do we also include volunteer hours, volunteer opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. So in municipal court, for all cases, all the time, you can take care of the fine portion of a case through community service.
Okay, have we had input from people who have gone through this process to help give recommendations about the barriers they experienced during the process?
So I think that's something that's going to be developed through the program, looking at the statistics and identifying those things that end up being barriers. We've certainly gathered a lot of information through the clinics and seeing, you know, roughly 300 data points on, you know, where people are and why, you know, what's holding up their licenses. So I think that information is going to be gathered en masse through the program, and the program will develop itself and alter itself as people help to identify what it is that's hanging them up in getting legal driving back.
Okay, and last question, and I think you alluded to it earlier a little bit, but so we're going to have somebody who they can go to right out of the courtroom after they're done with their case, and just go here and understand the process to how to get your license reinstated.
Yeah, the hope is to have someone on site. If they aren't on site, to have a phone number where someone can rapidly be contacted and start an initial process. It is a process because a lot of the information is going to have to be gathered from KDOR to make sure that we understand the full scope of their situation, because most of the time it's not simple. It's not something that you can go to their website and say, well, you know, if I just clear this up, oh, well, it turns out there's an administrative fee from the state. It's, you know, depending on if they've been revoked, if they've got multiple suspensions, if they had a DUI, if they drove without insurance and were in an accident, and minors were in the car. Oh, well, now you might have a suspension that lasts several, you know, a decade and a half, because you have to wait until those minors reach the age of majority before their claim disappears. So it's incredibly complicated, and that's exactly why such a program is needed. So there needs to be an initial intake. There needs to be a process of data gathering, and to then create that, as we called it, a roadmap, so that people can really understand what they have to do in this incredibly complicated arena.
Okay, one more quick question
Yeah.
from that. Do you guys plan on making any recommendations in the future about possible changes to the law, or are you trying to steer away from that?
So I think that we should always be making those recommendations. The idea of this particular program was to say, hey, there's a problem, and it may be a legislative problem, but we live in the world we live in. And so how can we combat this problem right now with the tools that exist presently in our state? I think that there are a lot of people, and I think it was expressed by the steering committee, that they would love to advocate for change in the laws. The laws are problematic. But point in time right now, how do we help the people who need help without just hoping that we can get changes that haven't been made over decades? So I don't know if that answers your question exactly. It's kind of a qualified maybe yes. But this program isn't designed to change the laws. The program is designed to work within existing laws. And if the laws change, I think it would work within the laws as they changed to continue to provide assistance to people to be successful.
Okay, I think you guys are in a unique and a good position to be able to really suss out maybe some of the shortcomings in current law. So if that's possible in the future, just my particular opinion, that would be something pretty good to look at.
I agree completely, and I think that the data that will be generated through working with all these folks will really help to identify the shortcomings.
Okay, and I appreciate everything you and the rest of the board have done putting work in this. This is a good thing for our community. Thank you, sir.
So I'll be quick, I'm sorry. I know Councilmember Johnson was leaning towards his microphone. I guess to recap, there is no definition that is legal definition of financial hardship.
Manifest hardship.
Manifest hardship.
Yes, sir.
So for consistency, is it set up, or should we either define it or just have it as a checkbox? If you check that you are going through a hardship, then that's that. There's no explanation. Just because you mentioned that some people are, 95% of folks, I believe, get some type of relief if they claim a hardship. I'm not sure if everyone knows what a hardship is or if they qualify, and thus, should we open it up so we're not judging one person's hardship over another, or should we, I guess, define it? What would be best practices moving forward?
I mean, I think that sounds much more like a legal question. Whether or not you should define it, I think is really not for me to be able to determine. I know that the legislature, which created Senate Bill 127 of, I think, last year, used that language, and so that language is mirrored in our city ordinance. So it was designed to be discretionary, where a judge could say, taking into account many, many factors, which would be very hard to create a definition for, including, beyond financial. There are also family factors and situational factors, and come to a determination on their own. And so that's really how it's applied, is looking extremely broadly at not just the individual, but the individual circumstances and their family situation.
Perhaps having appropriate legal counsel will actually allow folks to better understand what that terminology is so they can describe their situation better. So
Absolutely.
Perhaps leaving it open is the way to go. But
Yeah, so one of the things you just said is incredibly important, because on every one of our motions, there is a narrative portion where you describe your manifest hardship. And that's not something that's incredibly easy for lay people to just suddenly articulate. Well, what's your manifest hardship? Well, I don't know what my manifest hardship is, but here's my situation. And so I think that's another area where we've seen, especially through the clinics, the documents that came from the clinics where people were assisted in articulating their manifest hardship were much more successful than those people who just were given a form and said, all right, have at it, describe it. So I think that what we will see is better articulated situations and circumstances describing manifest hardship in the documents that get filed with the court.
Thank you.
So I had a few questions. On that state law and looking at line of effort 1, is a part of that roadmap taking advantage of the new legal change that allowed people who had suspended licenses to get a restricted license during this whole process?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and that's something that, whenever folks, going back to the clinic, whenever anyone was identified with that potential, that document was filed. Because, as soon as you file that, you can get someone a little bit of relief to give them time and space to work on those things that are suspending them, especially if it's just financial suspensions. Now, if you've got a suspension that's administrative, like DUI, or for not having insurance, you don't qualify. And so we found there were a lot of situations where people didn't qualify for the hardship, but wherever we identified there was the potential to get that hardship license, and I say it was Marilyn Harp's program and the pro bono attorneys who did the work. So they filed that paperwork, and I would anticipate exactly the same through this program.
Okay. And one, I'm really excited about this. I've been excited since those first conversations with Durham. But one challenge that I've seen is a lot of the folks who really need to know this never hear about it, no matter what our best efforts are. So what are our efforts to let folks know? Are we going to do like what WPD did with the youth members on the gang file, where they sent certified letters to everyone they had identified? Are we going to do that and let them know, hey, here's this program, we know your license is suspended, here's step 1, come in, start them down that path?
Simple answer to your question is I don't know that piece yet. And as the program develops, I think that we can both leverage court data, but also leverage some of our own media resources to get the word out that this program exists and that there is hope. KLS was able to generate a lot of interest and support just by putting posters up and putting it on websites. And so I think once it's known, I think that the knowledge of the program will spread very rapidly through our community, especially when people know that it's not a trap.
Right.
It's not a trick to roll you up and put you in jail. It's something to actually help you. So how we advertise it, how that happens, I think that will also have to be a collaborative effort, and we'll get together and create ideas and look at what the best modes are to get this to the people who need it. But
okay. Well, one suggestion I have to add to that table, getting the word out, is USD 259, because you got your kids in school, whether you're driving there legally or not. So if they have something to bring back, whether it's a flyer or not, and give to their parents, I mean, that's just another contact to get the word out. And then lastly, you answered part of this, so I won't ask the whole question, but since this program can expand, I know we have a social justice workshop coming up. I really like the collaborative effort I see now. What we've seen before with either Amnesty Day or expungement workshops is just so many people and that need being so high. So is this that same program that can transform and deal with that as well?
I would assume it really, as needs are identified and as the program grows, assuming that it grows, especially funding wise, I think it really can address any number of issues. While I mentioned expungement, it's not expressly mentioned in these lines of effort. And so if certain different areas of need are identified, I think depending on the resourcing, this program could expand into those areas.
Okay. Well, I want to say I support that. We did a child support amnesty deal at Atwater 2019 maybe. They raised almost $30,000 for the state. They got warrants removed for folks, and I think all of those folks are put on payment plans. So that was a benefit, and especially if their license can get suspended now, that's one thing. If it's rolled up into this, that would be great. And I can't remember who did the expungement workshop over at the courthouse, and I know there was a private donor, and I want to say
Yeah.
they may have put 75,000 in, but that line was over 1,000 people, and they ran out of money before the line could even get all the way
Yeah.
in the building. So if we can identify those sources of funding, and I know we're starting right now, but if we can get all of that going, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and we have the people involved who got that funding. And so the hope is, and the anticipation is, once a program exists, that those type of funding sources will step forward. You know, it's hard to fundraise for something that isn't really up.
Right.
So, you know, this roughly $150,000, I think I think of it as seed money.
Yep.
It's to grow something bigger. It's initiating the program, and then once it's initiated, I think there's the potential to make it something much bigger than what we started with.
Oh, perfect. Well, I think we're starting in the right place with the suspended driver's licenses and seeing how many people are impacted by that. Appreciate all the work that you and the committee did, and looking forward to seeing this grow and keep moving. And I'm happy to help get the word out too, because this is sorely needed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The last item is also a very significant item, and it has to do with one-time funding that we have received from the federal government through the American Rescue Plan. And we're going to make a presentation. Sally Stang will start the presentation regarding work that's been done in assessing need and then coming up with possible options for the use of those funds.
Can we minimize that so that it's just in the taskbar? See the dash in the middle there, on to the right-hand side. Up. Please don't, yeah, there we go. I was gonna say, please don't hit the hang-up button.
Yeah. We do have a consultant online too, who's going to be participating today. So good morning. It's been a pretty heavy day. Let's add homelessness to it, right? The item that we have for you today is the Home Investment Partnership funding under the American Rescue Plan Act. So we're in the middle of the planning process. And so we are providing an update and seeking feedback as we work to put together that final plan. So the Home Investment Partnership Program was created in 1990. It is the one program that is not an acronym, although HUD insists on making all the letters capital. I think they're just trying to keep us on our toes. It was created in 1990 to provide decent and affordable housing to lower income families, expand capacity for nonprofits, strengthen the ability of state and local governments to provide housing, and leverage private sector resources for the development of affordable housing. So in addition to our annual allocation of home funds, which for 2022 was about $1.5 million, we have been allocated just over $5.5 million under the American Rescue Plan Act. And 15% of that amount, so just over $826,000, can be used for planning and administration activities. We normally use home funds for infill housing production, rehabilitation for homeowners, can be used for a repair program. We aren't using it for that currently. We use CDBG funds. We use it for down payment assistance, rental preservation. But if you notice, those are all really about affordable housing units. Everything it can do is about units. It's either the development of or the funding of subsidies to make units affordable. But HOME-ARP, really, they added a little twist to it under the American Rescue Plan Act with a focus on providing services and shelters to individuals experiencing homelessness or other vulnerable populations, such as those fleeing domestic violence or human trafficking. And it can be used for only 4 activities: production and preservation of affordable housing, tenant-based rent assistance, homeless prevention and housing counseling services, or the development of non-congregate shelter for the homeless. In order for the city to receive the funds from HUD, we must engage in a consultation and public participation process and develop a HOME-ARP allocation plan. We really looked at this as our opportunity to do a deep dive into the homeless systems here in Wichita. The plan must describe how the city is going to distribute the HOME-ARP funds, including the way in which the funding will be used to address issues around qualifying populations. Upon completion of the plan, it must be submitted to HUD as a substantial amendment to the city's 2021 annual action plan. So through a competitive process earlier this year, Development Strategies, Inc. was procured to provide consulting services for the preparation of the plan. And they have subcontracted with Home Base and Community Connections Consulting Services as well. So their initial scope was to be completed in 3 phases: the consultation with local providers and experts, an analysis of our needs and gaps around homelessness in Wichita, and to report those findings and gather feedback to develop the plan. And so I'm going to turn it over here to Andy Feaster from Development Strategies, Inc. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor, council members. I'm Andy Feaster, Principal with Development Strategies, and it's good to see you all again. As Sally mentioned, I'm here to talk about our work so far on the HOME-ARP allocation plan, and our intent is really to kind of let you all know what we've heard so far from consultations with the different providers through a survey to providers, and kind of where we're leaning to in terms of recommendations. I have with me online Alyssa Weber and Julie Silas with Homebase. They're going to talk about some best practices that should help address some of the priority needs and gaps. Alyssa, could you say hello just so we can make sure the audio is working? Okay. We're going to troubleshoot audio while I proceed here, but I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've been looking at. We've really been evaluating the homelessness ecosystem as a whole to look at those needs and gaps and kind of really working toward those implications for Wichita. So Sally covered a little bit about what HOME-ARP is, and what we've been working on is the consultations. We're really kind of completing the needs and gaps analysis today. Following this work session, we're going to take your feedback and make any refinements that we need to, and kind of work toward completing the draft allocation plan that will go to public comment. We'll have some public meetings to get broader public feedback and insight, and then it goes toward the approval process. Okay. Okay. Alyssa, could you try again and make sure you're unmuted? Sorry about that. Okay, we'll proceed the best we can.
Can you go to the bar?
Yeah.
Maybe hit exit so it minimizes that. Down in the right-hand corner, can you click on the volume, make sure our volume's up? Is Teams still up? Click on that.
She's on mute there.
So others on Teams could hear Alyssa. Alyssa, could you try one more time to unmute and say hello? Okay.
You do it in Morse code. Morse
Julie?
Does not sound as though we're going through.
How about now?
Thank you.
Morning.
Welcome.
Oh, are we good?
Can you hear us now?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, great. Okay.
All right, we are set.
Good morning.
So,
Yes, please allow.
all right, I'm not gonna touch anything else. So that's really where we are in the process. So as Sally mentioned, the purpose of HOME-ARP is to reduce homelessness and increase housing stability. So it is to serve homeless individuals and families, but also those at risk of homelessness and experiencing other vulnerable situations. We see this really as a one-time opportunity to fill gaps in the ecosystem. And so this diagram here is really to reflect what is the full picture of the homelessness ecosystem. And, you know, the arrows go from unstably housed to those who enter the homelessness system. And really, the supportive services along the bottom that are addressed all along the way. It was interesting to hear the last presentation because that's part of the puzzle that can help, you know, homeless individuals just having, you know, their licenses addressed, and those situations can help. But really, you know, we looked at, you know, there's prevention, there's diversion, there's housing, whether it's permanent housing, and these different elements, temporary housing being shelter and transitional housing, and ultimately working toward and people leaving the homelessness system to being stably housed permanently. And so one of the other things we looked at is the data. And I know you all have been looking at the data, and there's efforts to improve our understanding as a community of the challenge. This is an overview of the data. Average days homeless is 71 days, and a couple other key items here. But what we really looked at were some of the discrepancies that make this work more challenging. We know that there's about 180 names on the by name list, those who are identified to be put in housing. Yet there's 200 vouchers available, about 30 vouchers available for veterans. One of the key challenges we heard there is there's not enough units for individuals, for people to go into. And Sally told me this morning that there's about 130 vouchers approved, but for people who are still homeless because they can't find units to go into. The 2020 point-in-time count was about 619 individuals, a big increase from 10 years prior. Yet HMIS shows about 1,660 individuals served through the homelessness system. So the point-in-time count is just a snapshot on an individual day. The providers who are participating in HMIS
So just to follow
serve
up.
a lot more. Yes.
You just mentioned we have 200 vouchers available. That 130, you said were approved, but they don't have, I guess, a landlord or a property that will accept folks with those vouchers. Is that a correct assessment? That 130 actually have gone through the process, a case manager has actually recommended it, voucher in hand, they just can't find a unit.
That is correct.
And reaching out to, I guess, those folks and others, what has been the barrier for them to find an apartment?
What I've heard is that, you know, with the current market, there's fewer landlords accepting vouchers, particularly those with, you know, more challenged rental histories, because they can rent them at a higher rate easily to anybody today. And then are there kind of other challenges you've heard of you have continued to work on it?
Oftentimes it's criminal backgrounds. We have a lot of landlords that, you know, that's going to to be a barrier for them to get into. So we try to work with landlords who may be willing to work with harder to serve populations, but that number is definitely decreasing. And the challenge in finding units is not just among the homeless vouchers. Our voucher program overall is seeing decreases in the success rate, the number of people who are able to lease up in our community. So we are in desperate need of more affordable housing units willing to participate in assistance programs.
Do you think some of the rates that they're paying are a little bit below average?
The rates that they pay for the vouchers, not below average. I mean, we are seeing tremendous rent increases coming out of the pandemic. Sometimes rent's going up from $600 a month to $900 a month. That's a 50% increase. Those increases are definitely starting to price people out.
That's
Yep, which is another concern.
So it's the market and trying to battle supply and demand. Okay.
What are particular barriers that you're seeing with people with families, or homeless with families? Because we were at St. Anthony's homeless shelter not too long ago, and they talked about it used to be a 6-week wait to get families out of the shelter and into housing, and now it's about a 6-month wait. So is there anything you guys are seeing in particular with families as to some of the additional barriers, or is there a way that we can focus on them first? I assume just because of the number of people that we have in the family, that limits the units that are available even more.
I mean, one element is the lack of like quality, affordable, like 3 or 4 bedroom, 5 bedroom units, so family appropriate units, and then also accepting vouchers if they are part of that system. But there have not been a lot of those units that are, dedicated affordable housing added to the market. So it's a similar challenge as we just discussed, but a little bit because of unit size and so forth, more of an issue for families in particular.
Thank you.
We had a discussion on this just this week, talking about we're seeing more and more families being denied because they were evicted at post-moratorium being lifted. So the shelters are seeing larger families come in. There's just not the resources that they had before, and those evictions on their record are preventing them from leasing another unit.
And on the shelter side, there haven't been really units added for families for that temporary kind of assistance for a number of years. So they're generally at capacity, and also, like you said, I've struggled to find those placement units outside of kind of the shelter system.
Thank you.
Well, the other thing we looked at is there's about 1,800 beds or units specifically for those in homelessness or exiting homelessness. These are just the acronyms for emergency shelter, transitional housing, and others. It is an increase, a slight increase from 2010, but as you've heard and we heard talking to providers one-on-one, is pretty much everybody's at capacity, stays are longer than ever, limited units for people to move into, and there's really very few low barrier options, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in the best practices component. And then another challenge particularly came to light when we were talking with United Way on the data, is that there is an unknown number of people struggling that aren't represented in any of these counts because they aren't part of the HMIS system. So it's kind of like there is improved collaboration, but in terms of getting a good full picture of the scale of the challenge, we just can't with the data we have today. And so we use this diagram again to really identify what are some of the gaps. While all of these services are available, and there are some, agencies doing prevention and diversion, and there are housing options and a number of great and helpful supportive services, there's not like a overarching culture of prevention and diversion, which seeks to keep people out of the homeless system or in the system and for as short a term as possible. There is a lack of permanent supportive housing, which we we just kind of clearly discussed, you all have heard, and it's borne out in our discussions and the data. There are no low barrier emergency shelter options for women, which is a particular challenge in our community. And then there's a need for more supportive services, be it case management, housing navigators, just to help both individuals and families working through getting a lease, utilities, all of the housing aspects, following up weekly, but also being a liaison to work with the landlords. So landlords have somebody to call and can be more comfortable working with those individuals. There's a need for more outreach, mental health treatment, substance abuse treatment, and kind of coordination of all of these things moving forward. And so kind of our question and working with the city and the provider community is thinking through what's the best use of the funds, what would be most impactful, and what would align best practices with the strengths that are already in our community. And really, what is the goal? What's most strategic, being one-time funds? For instance, we know there's a need for more case management, peer support, housing navigators. But if we fund that with HOME-ARP, the funds are going to end in 2030 or sooner. So how will we pick up the funds and continue that good work when the funds are gone? So is it better to invest in capital in a facility or units? That's really some of the considerations we're working on. Eligibility, Sally talked about this. I'm going to highlight a couple more things. Preservation of affordable housing is construction of new units, acquisition and rehabilitation of existing, or using it to rehabilitate facilities that are already under operation. For tenant-based rental assistance, this isn't just rental assistance. It can help with security deposits and utility payments. One caveat is this cannot be used in conjunction with home buyer programs. Supportive services is a very, very lengthy list of what HOME-ARP funds can be used for. So if you think of pretty much any supportive services for those experiencing homelessness or at risk, other than home ownership counseling, it pretty much applies. And finally, on non-congregate shelters, again, acquisition or new construction or rehabilitation, this will not fund operations of the facilities, can fund the supportive services, but a non-congregate shelter per HUD must have private bathrooms. It can be like a hotel room. You can have shared kitchens, but those, so it can't quite be a dorm where there's shared bathrooms. It needs to have private bathroom facilities. And as Sally talked about, these are the 4 qualifying populations: sheltered and unsheltered homeless, at risk of homelessness, or those facing, eviction or housing insecurity, fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, sexual assault, or human trafficking, and other populations where supportive services would prevent homelessness. This does also include people with disabilities, where there's also an extreme affordable housing shortage in our community. So getting to the needs and gaps, this was really informed a lot by our conversations. We've talked to one-on-one, in person and virtually, these 20 organizations. We've reached out to others, and we're unable to connect. But the intent of one-on-one conversations was to have candid, thoughtful, and honest assessments of the strengths and weaknesses of our ecosystem. And these are the items that rose to the top in terms of needs and gaps: non-congregate shelter for single women, case managers, including housing navigators and outreach, homeless prevention and diversion programs, landlord education and engagement so we can get more landlords accepting vouchers, more safe, affordable housing units, and funds for paying utilities and back rent to help people kind of stay in stable housing. There is this kind of hatched element too, where HOME-ARP qualifies for part of it, or this action that HOME-ARP can fund part of it. So quality of housing units, affordable housing units, it can be rehabilitation or new construction. When we're talking about the mental health challenge, which we know is a big challenge in our community, HOME-ARP will not fund facilities, but can fund supportive services that address mental health challenges. And I want to highlight a few items from the provider survey. We sent this out for about a week or two to providers we talked to and others on our list, just to understand, again, and be able to document where the priorities are. So the qualified populations in the city that have the largest gap in services, what rose to the top was people dealing with mental health disorders, followed by addiction and substance abuse, just being sheltered and unsheltered homelessness, and those being at risk of homelessness, and single women. Priority needs in terms of kind of the services or elements that are missing. Supportive services rose to the top, followed by affordable rental housing and nonprofit operating funding, which a small portion of HOME-ARP can go to about $250,000, I think, of this grant. Non-congregate shelter, rental assistance, and capacity building for nonprofits.
If we could go back to the last slide real quick. Single women, do we know if that is domestic violence related, people fleeing situations like that, or what are some of the other circumstances that lead to single women becoming homeless that we can identify?
It's really an all of the above answer. There are no low barrier facilities for women experiencing any element of housing instability or homelessness. What's a big challenge that we heard in the ecosystem is because there's no safe place or very limited safe places, there could be in the motels or couple up where there's more trauma added to already a traumatic situation. But the elements that lead to homelessness, we didn't kind of research that as much, but I would say it's things that anybody else struggles with, be it just a job loss, a difficult family situation, and all those other things. But it's really, I think, an all of the above answer.
Okay, thank you.
We also asked what kind of supportive services are needed as the priorities. So what rose to the top is case management, which addresses a lot of the mental health, substance abuse, stabilization, finding ID challenges, but also housing, navigation, et cetera. Homelessness prevention services was second, followed by housing, counseling, life skills training, and job readiness. So really a lot of themes started to emerge as we worked through this. And so the next step in the process was to work with Homebase and think about, in light of what we heard from the providers and are seeing in the data and other conversations we had around homelessness and at risk of homelessness, what are some best practices? What are other communities doing that are moving the needle, that are reducing stays in shelter, have a higher success rate of permanent housing placement, et cetera? And Alyssa's going to talk through 3 of these program elements that we think are important to consider in Wichita with the HOME-ARP funding and other efforts that are underway.
Great. Good morning. You all can hear me, just double checking.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Andy. As Andy mentioned, my name is Alyssa Weber. I'm from an organization called Homebase. We are technical assistance providers for HUD, and we work with communities around the country to help them improve their homeless systems of care. And so as Andy mentioned, I'm going to go through a few best practices that we've seen work in other communities and are considered best practice across the country to help identify or to address some of the gaps that Andy identified in your community. So the first one that I wanted to talk about is low barrier housing focused shelter. So this model of shelter is designed to provide the necessary emergency housing for people experiencing homelessness, but in a way that really focuses on long-term solutions. So assisting a household in attaining and retaining permanent housing. So there's really two elements here. So when we think about this low barrier, what we mean by that is that the shelters are designed to serve people in a housing first model. So we're really working to screen people in rather than screen them out. This often means that shelters are welcoming people regardless of whether they're entering with pets or partners or possessions. The rules and restrictions that are in place are really focused on safety, so things like no weapons or something like that. And they do allow kind of free movement so people can come and go as they wish. Shelters are typically open 24 hours a day. And the physical spaces and facilities allow for community, congregation, outdoor areas for pets, storage for possessions, and places where partners can cohabitate. And often another piece of this, if a rule is violated, assistance is not necessarily terminated, rather concerns are addressed through things like case management. And the other aspect is the housing focus piece. So in addition to being low barrier, these shelters include services that are client-centered and tailored to support the household's ability to obtain and maintain housing. And this really is focused on voluntary case management and other services, such as job training or benefits enrollment, things like that. And staff are trained in cultural competency and tend to have smaller caseloads so that they're able to spend more time with clients to help them meet their housing goals. And one thing we've seen really emerge as a best practice, kind of spurred by the COVID-19 pandemic, is non-congregate shelter. And so this allows sleeping areas that are separate for individual households, usually in separate rooms, such as converted hotels or things like that. Andy spoke a little bit to this earlier, but that's the model that we see is usually in something like a motel where there is a bathroom, as Andy mentioned. And these really, this model of non-congregate shelter really can help improve residential stability. People feel safer and can help improve engagement with staff and things like case management. Next slide. Thank you. So we just are highlighting a few examples, and just to step back a second, we have created kind of a longer kind of best practices write-up on each of these that include additional examples and more information about successes and data that we are happy to distribute as well if you have not already received those. But here are just a few examples that highlight some of the success that these programs provide. So the first here is the Salvation Army Center for Hope in Charlotte, North Carolina. And this program is actually one that converted from a more traditional model after seeing the successes that low barrier housing focused shelter has for people experiencing homelessness. And so they converted to this low barrier housing focused model and ended up removing their entry requirements, such as sobriety and minimum income, and leveraged other resources like rapid rehousing to really focus on connecting people to permanent housing. And what they found when they made this conversion to this model is that permanent housing placements out of the shelter increased by more than 100%. And 84% of families placed in permanent housing did not fall back into homelessness. And their shelter stays changed from an average of 6 months to an average of only 39 days. So that shows kind of the strength of moving from one model to another in terms of stability and connecting people to permanent housing. The second model out of Fresno, California, is a newer model that was designed as a non-congregate shelter, also using low barrier and housing focused design in its facility, which means that they don't have requirements regarding income, sobriety, or compliance with mental health treatment. They are providing shelter regardless of sexual orientation, marital status, or gender identification. And the staff are on site 24 hours a day to provide services, do things like intakes and work on diversion, and help respond to crises. And they're all trained in mental health first aid. And what we've seen here, and this is a newer program, the average rate of safe exits is 70%, meaning that people are exiting the shelter to places other than the streets or jail. But the next kind of best practice we see, and this kind of speaks to some of the conversation that happened earlier around landlords and the difficulty finding units for people with vouchers, is landlord engagement strategies. So what we're talking about here is really a community level strategy that's focused on building and maintaining collaboration between housing providers and local landlords. So we really like to think of this as a partnership where everyone benefits. The landlords are receiving incentives and support, and in exchange, the people experiencing homelessness and housing providers are receiving available units. And there's a few things that we like to highlight when we talk about these. Again, we really want to emphasize the system level planning. These are not to be planned at the agency level, or they're just not as effective when you think at the agency level. You really want to think about the system, community level, including partners from other sectors. And one of the things we always build into these are kind of a menu of options of either monetary or non-financial incentives. And so there's a lot of different examples. Monetary options include things like leasing or move-in bonuses, risk or damage mitigation or reimbursement funds, things we call barrier busting funds. So these are things that pay for some of the issues around meeting housing quality standards or other standards that the vouchers may have attached to them, paying for application fees, just generally kind of the burdens that may come with leasing to someone that's using rental assistance. Some also build in vacancy funds. Sometimes it can take a little bit of time to lease up with somebody that is using rental assistance, so paying for that gap where the unit may be vacant for a month or so. So those are kind of some examples of monetary options. We also really like to think about the non-financial options. And this is where, HOME-ARP can also help support some of these things like client case management and wraparound services, providing a landlord liaison, providing landlord-tenant mediation services, providing education opportunities for both landlords and tenants. One thing we like to do or think about is creating what we call client portfolios, or something that kind of lends like a human side, detailing a family story or a household story to kind of add that more human touch, present those to landlords. So there's a variety of things that can be incorporated into these plans. So you want to think about how to use these various different options together to create an overall strategy. And then again, really being intentional about landlord outreach and landlord retention. So once you have actually engaged the landlord, how to keep them as part of your program. Next slide, thanks. So here are some examples of successful landlord engagement strategies. This threshold in Maricopa County, Arizona, is a newer one that is incorporating a lot of what I just talked about. They have a centralized landlord engagement over 20 cities, so really thinking at the systems level. They have leasing bonuses for new landlords, a dedicated landlord support team with a 24-hour-a-day hotline, a web-based housing search platform where landlords can list available units, risk mitigation funds for up to 3 times monthly rent if there's any damages, and vacancy funds for up to 1 month rent. And then another example, and just, some of the successes they've seen, I think they've only been in operation for about a year. They've already worked with over 151 property owners and housed 325 households in this program in a year. So that really shows that building some of these things in is attracting landlords and helping to connect people to housing. This second example here from the Bay Area, run by Abode. They work in 6 Bay Area counties, and they include signing bonuses for new landlords and additional bonuses for continued participation, assistance in screening tenants for units, on-call staff to respond to landlord concerns, including after hours, higher security deposits, vacancy funds to cover losses between tenants, and provide free housing quality standard inspections. And since they've been in operation, they've housed, I think this is since 2013, so about 9 years, they've housed over 6,000 people through this program and have worked with over 2,000 landlords. So they've seen a lot of success also in connecting people to housing through their program. Next slide. So the final best practice that we wanted to talk about is really kind of two, homelessness diversion and prevention. So we often talk about these together because they leverage a lot of the same strategies to assist people. So things like rental assistance, utility assistance, strength-based case management, connecting people to other resources like legal services and things like that, to prevent people from losing housing or divert people who have already lost their housing from shelters. So diversion is how we think about really trying to keep people out of shelter, those people that have already typically recently lost their housing. The goal here is to quickly resolve their immediate housing crisis by helping them find alternative housing arrangements so they can avoid entering a shelter. And then prevention is for people who are not yet experiencing homelessness or unhoused. And again, using those interventions I mentioned, rental assistance, utility assistance, case management, to help them either stay in their current housing or find alternative safe housing before they experience homelessness. Next slide. So some best practices when thinking about these two different kind of interventions. So diversion, really what we want to do with diversion is identify households when they first access the homeless response system, and that it would usually be through your coordinated entry process that you have set up in your community, or if a household presents at a shelter. And how we do that is utilizing diversion screening tools or other questions to really help assess whether somebody is appropriate for diversion if the interventions we have will meet their needs. If diversion is not possible for any reason, making sure that there is a housing-focused shelter that they can be referred to as an alternative. When we think about prevention, we want to make sure that this is integrated into the homeless response system, even though people are not technically experiencing homelessness yet. They are kind of on the verge potentially of doing that. So we want to make sure that the homeless response system and other partner systems are all connected and working on prevention together. Really thinking about tailoring the level of assistance to meet the household needs. Some people may need additional services like case management and eviction prevention services, things like that, while others may just need a small rental assistance or utility assistance to help them maintain their housing. And then, as I mentioned, always trying to incorporate eviction prevention components when possible. And the results that we find with these, one of the big things is helping to minimize the trauma that people can experience when they become homeless. I mean, it's something that can affect them for the rest of their lives, having that experience. And so by preventing people from becoming homeless, or connecting them as quickly as possible back to housing, but instead of entering shelter, that can really help minimize that trauma. It also significantly reduced the cost of the community and kind of this burden on the homeless response system and shelters that, may not have vacancies, don't have room. These can kind of help keep people out of that system before they either go into shelter or need some of the other interventions that can be costly. And with that, I can either take questions or hand it back over to Andy.
Thank you, Alyssa. And I asked Alyssa to dive deep into those because it's not really the practice in Wichita. And moving forward, it would be great to see some of those best practices integrated. And I want to talk about that a little bit in terms of implications for Wichita. So how do these align with the needs and gaps identified through the consultation process? I'm not going to read all of these, but I wanted to create an example of how low barrier housing focused shelter would address some of those key challenges, like needed shelter beds, reducing shelter stay time, and then what it would require on the far right and how HOME-ARP might fit in. So for low barrier housing focused shelter, it requires operations funding, which again, that doesn't come from HOME-ARP, but organizations will need to show they have the capacity to operate such a facility. Case managers, outreach, addressing mental health and substance abuse. So a lot of the boxes, a lot of the key issues that were raised. Diversion, for an example, focuses on quickly connecting people who lose housing with resources. That requires a different kind of coordination, new screening tools, the right case managers, and housing navigators. So this is where it starts to come together in terms of connecting the dots. And then we were working with the city team on how does this really come together? How can this $5.5 million be best used if the providers have the capacity and desire to move forward with this kind of model? There's still an immediate need for housing units, and I think it's even just our conversation this morning, it's even stronger than we thought a couple months ago. But is a navigation center with housing units the best use? And what this could look like under the provisions of HOME-ARP is HOME-ARP can fund the development, some capital reserves and supportive services for housing units. Non-congregate shelter could be a wing or a secured wing or what have you of a facility. It can fund the facilities and the supportive services. The caveat here is an organization that applies for these really have to show that they can operate it for 2 or 3 years at least, that they have the capacity to do so. These units can be converted to permanent housing. So if there's not a need, hopefully the need is reduced over time, they can be converted to housing units. And you can allow for safe spaces for women while meeting the broader need because you can design it appropriately. And a navigation center, a HOME-ARP funding can fund the supportive services that would be part of this navigation center. You can and a portion of the facilities at least as part of a housing development or a shelter development can fund this space. It would require multiple agencies providing staff and working together in kind of a new way. And it really is an opportunity to align for better coordination for data entry, data collection, prevention, and diversion. And so it could be one facility, it could be a navigation center and non-congregated shelter located 2 blocks away from affordable housing units. There's a lot of different flexibility here, but this is kind of a model we're exploring, how could we address a lot of these needs, knowing that the HOME-ARP funds won't solve the problems. It's an important opportunity, it's an injection of capital, but it will not fill all of the gaps. It should support a cohesive strategy, which the community is working on, not just through HOME-ARP, but Project HOPE is testing a new approach to outreach, to peer support. It's targeted downtown and so forth, but it's testing out some different case management and service provision needs. We've talked a lot about HOME-ARP, but the Homeless Task Force that is beginning soon is really about alignment and coordination about long-term strategic planning. So it will address other needs that HOME-ARP won't address. Identify roles and priority funding. So HOME-ARP may, for instance, provide affordable housing units. And then you know that the community knows there's a need for improving case management, housing navigation, et cetera. And the providers and ecosystem can really say to the funders, like, this is what we really need to focus on long term. We've got a facility. We think we can operate it well for a long time. We need more case management. That's where we need to focus our fundraising. So that's really kind of the thinking of HOME-ARP within the greater context. And quickly, before I stop, we had a provider session on the 19th where we went through this presentation and had discussion. There was general support for this conceptual idea. The benefit of a central navigation facility would really help mitigate some of the challenges people are facing navigating services that are kind of spread out, different organizations. There's a need to address transportation and engaging those who have lived experience to make sure, like, those who have, moved from homelessness to stability, would this have helped if it was in place, for you? We had discussion around the location. Should it be downtown near all the services? Should it be, housing be spread out? And then providers wanted some more information on operating cost. Really getting at that, is it feasible for the provider community to, either one organization or a combination of a few to do something like this? And really also wanted to understand their roles and responsibilities moving forward. So it was good conversation, general support. I think we want to know how this model sounds to you all, what questions you have. Would you like to see more focus in a specific area? Things like that, happy to address.
So what in this model is new and transformational? Because some of my takeaway, there's a lot of information here. Some of the takeaway I'm getting, besides the fact that we need more units, is that a lot of this feels like it's supercharging the current system, which I think I'd be okay with if one of the slides didn't show that we have actually increased folks who are experiencing homelessness over the last 10 years. So I guess what part of this is new and not just, I think, supercharging the current system that we know for a 10-year look back hasn't actually put a dent in the numbers of folks who are experiencing homelessness as far as getting them where they need to be.
My thought, and then I'll let Sally add hers, is that there's not a singular goal that the ecosystem is working towards, such as reducing homelessness. I think organizations are, but there's kind of it's triage. Secondly, because the numbers haven't improved, there's a churn. People are going through the homeless system, getting housed maybe, and then falling back into homelessness or of some situation like that. So the approach isn't working. What this facility allows or forces is better coordination to make sure people are getting services up front. The reason we brought in the best practices was like how are communities and organizations using different models, like reducing stays in shelters versus it going up substantially, which it has here. So it's like to create something in the relatively short term by 2030 that fills this huge gap and starts to work toward this idea of prevention and diversion and really aligning the services well, which there's just, from my perspective and what I've seen, that's not the model here. I don't think that really fully answered, but Sally, do you have anything to add?
So, how is it different? I mean, one of the biggest takeaways is looking at shelter and not operating our shelter system like the 1990s. We're going to shuffle people over here for daytime shelter. We're going to shuffle people over here for nighttime shelter. And are they really getting tied to the services that they need when they spend the majority of their time being shuffled from one place to the other or sleeping, right? And so having a more comprehensive approach to trying to address individuals' needs or barriers to get them into permanent housing rather than just focusing on the operation of the shelter, right? We're open from this hour to this hour, take all of your things, go do what you can during the day, don't come back till 7 o'clock at night, isn't really a comprehensive way to really be addressing people's needs. And what we'll hear from a lot of the overnight shelters is, well, we push them out to encourage them to apply for jobs. Who applies for a job carrying all their possessions, walking in and out of businesses anymore? People apply for jobs working with someone at a computer, building their resume, dealing with different issues. It really is a different approach to how shelter can be done. We can't do it alone. We can't as the city. We can't with $5.5 million. It really needs a system overhaul. The end goal needs to be not just how many people are we serving should not be the key number we're looking at. The key number is how many people have we gotten into permanent housing? What's that next step, right? Not just churning people from this shelter, I can be in for 30 days, and now I'm going to this shelter, I can go in, for who knows what length of period, but in the end, who's really addressing that family's needs? We don't have a shelter that'll take couples. We don't have one that generally takes pets. We have different needs than we did in the 1990s individually. And we need to be, encouraging our partners in the community to change their existing models to reflect the changing need in the community.
Mayor, this is transformational, much like 316 was, except it takes it to another step. And it goes to what Sally's talked about over the last several months, or actually last year, and that is a 21st century approach, which is much more holistic and has much better chance for success. And I think when you talk about rental units, shelter, and most importantly, the support services in the same facility, that's a new model, and as Sally said, doesn't reflect the models that have been used over the last 20, 30, 40 years.
Well, and that's what I'm asking. Are you asking about, because 316 was a purchase of an asset that we're able to utilize, and the conversation started off about how we have 130 people with vouchers in hand who can't even get housing, even though we have vouchers in hand that's guaranteed money. And then we talk about services and the importance of case managers. Well, our case manager is just going to put more vouchers in more hands, and then those vouchers can't be used. And then we're not really making a dent, but we are actually continuing a system that has shown to, even in the best case scenario, you filled out the paperwork, you qualify, you get the voucher in hand, you're still homeless. I guess that's really what I want to talk about. My understanding, and I love the 316 project, is utilizing some of these older assets and turning them into places where people can get back on their feet. Are we looking towards providing more services that are currently out there, or are we looking towards possibly purchasing an asset that will allow us to replicate the success we had with 316?
I think you're looking at that as short-term and long-term, right? In the long term, I would love to have us come out with an asset with this, because that's a long-term result that's going to affect countless lives. We talk about the 316, it's 54 units. Those units are going to turn, and people are going to be moving, on to other opportunities, and we'll have more people going in. Case management is necessary. So we really have to, it is going to be a combination of both. The one piece we haven't mentioned on this, too, another opportunity we may have is at the State Housing Conference a couple weeks ago, Humankind and I actually did a joint session on the development of the 316. And the Kansas Housing Resource Corporation, their manager over their HOME-ARP program, tackled me after the meeting and said, we want to be part of this if you're going to do something like this again. And the state has an allocation of $22 million. Now, granted, they're not going to put it all in Wichita, but if we can get a piece of that to help supplement, I think that would be fabulous.
And I would love to know what the next steps with that would be, because if we could leverage our $5+ million with the states to replicate the 316 type program, we have an asset that's actually has shown success, then that would be transformational. I mean, I believe we're the only city in Kansas that actually has the 316 model that we use. I know other cities have used it. That is a best practice. But in Kansas, I think we're leading the way with that. And thus, if the state is interested in being a part of that success and helping us fund that, then who do I got to call? Like, what do we have to do to, I guess, see if that's an option?
So, this model here, that's my dream. If we could do it, that would be fabulous, right? Because we need a navigation space. We need to know, where does someone go? Where does someone, where can the hot team take someone? They can spend hours trying to figure out where to take someone. If we had a single point where they could go, they could be screened. Is it a diversion situation? Is it a prevention situation? Do they need referral into shelter? Are they a candidate for a VASH voucher? That sort of thing. There is no one-stop shop. There is no one place for people to go, right? Non-congregate shelter is a great thing that came out of COVID. One of the great things about non-congregate shelter is you don't have to worry about, is it a men's shelter? Is it a women's? How do people identify? Because they have individual spaces and the safety around those spaces, you can have a mixed population being served in non-congregate shelter. So it obviously is a dream. I think for me, the easiest portion is the affordable housing piece, because it has a mechanism to fund itself operationally. That's why 316 works, is they can collect enough in rents, because they have no debt service, to be able to pay for 24-hour security and 24-hour services for those families, in addition to building maintenance and management, without any debt service. So it funds itself over time. There's not a mechanism necessarily for that for the non-congregate shelter or the navigation center. So if we're going to be able to put those services out there, those funds for operations have to come from somewhere, and it's not rent like in the affordable housing units. We're also at a unique point in the state, in that the state passed some housing bills, including the state housing tax credit. So this could absolutely be done as part of a low-income housing tax credit project to build the affordable housing units, layering both federal and state tax credits to fund that, leaving more of that $5.5 million available for the other type of services, but not the operations.
So, 5.5 million of ARPA funds, tax credits, federal, state, plus the possibility that the state could come on top with either matching or helping fill up any gaps. How do I get you this? How many units do you want? Like, what can we actually do to get this plan done? Do you need a building? What do we need?
I mean, it could be built from the ground up, truly. You need a partner, because as the city, we don't operate shelters, and we're getting out of the managing property business, right? We really need our partners to come to the table. We would need a developer partner. We would need a nonprofit for any type of navigation center management and/or shelter operations. Getting our partners to think and do things different than they've always done it is a huge challenge. But what a tremendous opportunity.
So let's take advantage of this.
Right.
So if it's all right if the council endorses this concept, if I get head nods today, what we'd like to do then is put together an implementation plan, right? What the next steps would look like. But we wanted to first, because you've got some flexibility with the ARPA dollars, as outlined by Andy in his presentation, we want to make sure that this is the direction you want us to go.
And the HOME-ARP plan is going to require that we prioritize and create a preference list of what it is we want to make available. We could easily say, here's the dream, this is number one priority. If we get this, great. But what if we don't? What's the next step? What would be the other thing? Is it just the housing units? Is it just the non-congregate shelter?
Before we think about plan B and C, is this plan A? Is this what you want?
This would be my dream, yeah. Yes.
Can we get a number on it? Can we get some, if we want to put this in play, let's go with plan A before we start looking at plan B and C. Rather that's layering funds, rather that is, I guess, going out, figuring out what the inventory is, working with developers or whoever else that might have connections with with city staff to have conversations about this. Let's start with the best option and see if we can work that. And I love everything you're doing, Sally. I want to give you whatever you need to be successful. And frankly, let's not bid against ourselves. You know, if Plan A is going to be the one that will actually put a dent in this issue, let's go with that. And then if once we explore it, it doesn't work, then we'll go to Plan B. But we might even learn something in this process where Plan B looks a little more like Plan AB. So that would be my 2 cents on this.
Okay, I have 2 questions, sorry. The first one is, and I'm sorry if you addressed this one, I stepped out. How do we get the vouchers to be usable? Like, how do we increase either the amount that they're worth, or they're doing us no good if we have all of these and we're passing them out, but we're not able to use them. So while this big Plan A or whatever is working, like, how can we work on that piece?
Sure. I mean, it's something that, like I said, not just in the homelessness arena, we're working it on the regular voucher side too. It's trying to build relationships, improve relationships with existing landlords. We're looking at this from the bigger side too. So, you know, conversations are being had with a potential buyer, the Commodore. And so, you know, we're having conversations and going, okay, we might be able to provide some home funding, but let's get some set aside of units that maybe for some for homelessness, maybe some regular vouchers. So we need to be having those big level conversations too. You know, I was at the National Housing Conference last week, and almost everybody I talked to said they're in the same boat. They're having large companies coming in, swooping up apartment complexes and just saying, no rent assistance. We don't want to deal with Section 8. And we're hearing it coast to coast, big cities, small towns.
Which is kind of interesting because that's guaranteed money.
It is.
And so it's interesting that some people would just walk away from, I guess, from not using them.
So we're also looking at project-basing vouchers, which is a long-term rental assistance contract. So that would be coming to the housing board to discuss having conversations with landlords to do long-term rent assistance contract on a project-based level, which would set aside. That does allow us to pay some things like vacancy loss between residents and things. You got to give what's the benefit in it. The flip side that's a little bit challenging for us too when we talk about landlord incentives, if you remember in 2020, we actually launched a landlord incentive program and we put aside $100,000 for risk mitigation fund, vacancy loss, and we had zero claims
I was going to say it wasn't used.
Which was just crazy to me because we had always heard that landlords, you know, don't want to participate because they're afraid of huge damages. And I'm like, well, we didn't have any claims. Although it wasn't used, there weren't as many landlords who really even wanted to sign the documents to participate in that program. So we've been having more conversations with our nonprofit providers and even our housing staff to say building that relationship with landlords is really the key. And I always say, if you can find a larger apartment complex, if you can get them to commit to 10 units, you commit to being there once a week on site, you or a member of your team, right? To be there once a week. If the landlord's having an issue, you know, that's the biggest gap we see is that a landlord will have a problem. And when do they have a problem? Saturday night. Right? And the caseworker from the nonprofit referring agency isn't working, our staff isn't working, and the landlord gets frustrated. So this idea of a hotline or landlord liaison to try and build that so that landlords will come back. I've seen this in my career with landlords opting out for a period. Guess what? When their vacancies start creeping up, all of a sudden they do start coming back. But it's like an 18-month period where we see landlords dropping off. And then all of a sudden, it hits their bottom line because their units aren't necessarily all full, and then they start coming back. But we don't have 18 months to wait for that cycle to flow.
Right. I would just say my only other question is, how do we, we all know that Wichita has a lot of growth right now, and we're still building, and we're building lots of luxury apartments and things like that. How can we encourage people to build affordable, or, how do we... There seems to be so much focus, and I know there's not going to be a lot of money to be made, on the affordable side or whatever, but how can we encourage people to build affordable or
units,
even have that conversation?
So, we're looking at this more holistically. We've just recently, in the last couple of months, started meeting regularly with economic development. We had a great conversation yesterday about the Rural Housing Incentive District, which just sounds like not Wichita, but they did put in a provision for properties, multi-story properties that are in qualified census tracts that are over 25 years old, that have a primarily residential use. It's like a TIF for residential housing. But you have to actually apply to the Department of Commerce to show the housing need. And our discussion yesterday was, maybe we need to get out ahead of this. Let's do the study that we need so that we can say our primarily commercial area has a housing need. There are buildings that meet the criteria, and then we can try and sell that, in essence, to developers who are coming in, but only, if they're going to do some affordable units in there. I mean, we are trying to strategize for the long term. Problem is, homelessness, it's a now, but it's also a long term. And so we have to really look at, what strategies we can put in place, both long term and short term.
Well, plus you have the Affordable Housing Fund.
Yes, we do.
So should we, I guess, would it be appropriate to do a request for information to get ideas from developers and nonprofits on how a plan like this could be executed, what the numbers would be, what part of town, based on the RFI that makes sense? I think that a lot of what we have been discussing over the last year is been at the idea level. Could we take that to the next level of what the practicality, where something like this could go, and who would be willing to come to the table? Perhaps an RFI might bring people out who would be qualified but might not be in this discussion currently. So I just want to float that out there, and perhaps the manager can tell me if you've done more RFIs than I have. So
what I'd like to do is huddle with the team. You've got some great resources here that have gotten us to this point, and ask them to talk about what the next step would be and how we get a plan developed, and how we then go after not just the financial assistance we need, but how can we attract other parties for the construction project.
I do have concerns that our partners aren't necessarily going to want to play in what we're devising here. I mean, we did put out an RFP for winter shelter, adding some components that we're looking, which is better data, 24-hour operation. And we only got one response, and I don't believe they understood the requirements of the RFP. So I'm not seeing a whole lot of movement in them necessarily changing the way they do their operations, because we threw $200,000 out the door and didn't get people coming back. And the funny part about that was, I said, one of them came back to me and said, "How can you expect us to do this?" I said, "There's nothing in the RFP that said the number of people. We want to test out this model of how do you, if you're providing 24-hour service to both men, women, et cetera." And unfortunately, we'll be going back out again and having some further discussions, because we know there's a tremendous need for shelter this winter. And we're hearing rumblings that a Union Rescue Mission may be changing their model come January 1 and not be doing shelter at all. If that happens, how is the system going to respond to that?
So what are the plans to overcome that?
Right.
Because we're sitting on millions of dollars, and the council is ready to act, and frankly, we can't, I guess, be held up by organizations that aren't willing to work with us. How do we move forward without, I guess, the approval of an organization that's not willing to collect data?
Yeah, let us put our heads together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Temperatures are dropping.
All we needed was a green light to move forward, and I think I got the green light. So.
Yes, we definitely want to move forward, but I thought this conversation was to jump a little deeper, so I look forward to the next conversation.
Oh no, temperatures dropping already, so we're on the clock, especially if Union Rescue is going to change their model.
Yeah, and I don't want to mix too many issues in here. We do want to work on the winter or the emergency winter shelter issue, so we're going to regroup on that as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Mayor, in closing, I just want to thank the staff. We brought 2 programs to you that I think really will make a difference in people's lives, and especially those that are more disadvantaged residents. And so I'm really proud of the effort that staff has put in to get us to this point.
Ditto.
Thanks. That's all we have.
All right, well, if that's it, is there any discussion or announcements for the good of the body?
This Saturday, make sure you get some chili.
Anything else?
Eat chili. Eat chili.
That's right. All right, if not, we're adjourned. Thank you all.